Wonderful, like it always is. And anyway, today we are joined again with by Laurel Federbush, the harpist from Ann Arbor area. How you doing today?
Okay.
Thank you very much for showing up again. I mean, it's like always a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Always a pleasure to be here.
So anyway, that piece was
Such Chiming Melodious by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart from the Magic Flute.
Now you're not gonna believe this, but I actually was listening and I said, I think that might be Mozart. But you know, it's like
yeah, good ear.
yeah, it's like it just had the lightness to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a hallmark of his kind of music. His music, there seems to be. I mean, he was like we'll get into that later. But anyway, I'm really partial to Mozart. Might have had something to do with the movie years ago, Amadeus.
Amadeus, yeah.
Yeah, you've probably seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they play the clip from his concerto for flute and harp in it. So.
Right. He was an amazing talent. I wish he were around closer to our time. But then again, if he was around closer to our time, he might have been caught up with some other kind of music we wouldn't want to listen to. So.
Yeah, he might have become a real estate agent, or who knows what he would have done here.
Anyway, so again, every time I see you on Facebook, you have like different appearances you're making, and you've been playing at maybe some of the places you've been playing around by Ann Arbor and Detroit area.
Let's see, in Ann Arbor I play every Thursday 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. at the Grand Traverse Pie Company on Zeeb Road. I used to play at the one downtown near the Michigan Theater, but that one is no longer there. But now I play in the one on Zeeb Road every Thursday 11:30 to 1:30 p.m. for lunch hour, so that's fun. And then I play in West Bloomfield at Pistachio's Coffee House. That's on Maple Road near Orchard Lake Road. I play there every Wednesday night, 6:30 to 10 p.m. I mean, every now and then I have to miss one of those, for if I have a scheduling conflict. So if anyone's planning to come, it's good if they either check my Facebook page or else call the place just to make sure. But almost every week I'm there at those times. And then other than that, I play in the summer months, it's mostly weddings. So during the school year, I have a lot of orchestra things I might be plugging, but right now it's wedding season, so that's what I do now.
Now, it's like, of course, people who are having you perform at their weddings wouldn't want wedding crashers. So the public at large probably won't be able to listen to you there. But I think that this is a busy season for you, correct?
Yeah. Oh, I forgot one of my other steady things I have coming up during the summer. It hasn't started yet, but every summer I'll be on Sundays. I'll be playing 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Every Sunday this summer in Ann Arbor at the Great Lakes Chocolate and Coffee. So that's on Jackson Road. So
that's a good gig.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing is too, you never know. That just broadens your reach. I mean, every time you play, somebody wants to, would you play this kind of ceremony or this service, or so you're always networking. That's good for anybody who's. That's another thing we have to get into. Being an artist, an artist, being a musician. I think they're kind of interchangeable. But the terms, it's an awful hard. You have to have a kind of a thick skin, and you have to have some kind of a. I hate to use the overused term, but you have to have a belief in yourself and your abilities, because you take a lot of shots. People, and a lot of times too, when you don't get the gig or something. How do you feel about that? Does that get disappointing, or?
I think one thing. I think the less that you see it as some kind of an ego thing, like it's you personally, the better you are, the better off you are, both as a musician and as a person. I guess I tend to think of my music as something that's it's kind of more than me. It's things my teachers helped me, so it's them, the things that my teachers did to help me, and it's the composers I'm playing. And I guess me trying to reach the audience and serve their needs. So the less it's about Laurel Federbush, the better off. The more I can see it as pure music and be a good musician. So that way, it's I guess.
You make an interesting point there, because I never just as you're saying that. I mean, music is part of a tradition. I mean, it's like it's passed down to other people. And they have their own ways of playing it, and they're passing on their students, and they're also, and that personality comes in through. I mean, you don't know how many generations you're kind of channeling. You know, it sounds a
Right.
new age, but how many generations of people you are channeling when you're being taught and then when you're performing.
Right. And then, I guess I tend to be a little bit of a spiritualist, so I believe there's some spiritual energy out there that's helping me or that I'm channeling to bring in the music, so good spiritual energy, of course. And, then there's the harp itself. I guess I tend to think of the harp as having its own personality to some degree, and then there's the whole tradition of harp, apart from this individual harp, there's the whole, history of harp throughout the ages, so the music is coming through me, but it's not really me. And that's, I don't want to take credit for that idea either. I think I took a course in Japanese music, and there was something I remember they saying, and they were talking about the Japanese drummers, they were saying something, in order to play the drum, I don't remember exactly how they put it, but you don't have any hands. And the idea was that, or you don't have a hand or something like that. So it's not your hand that's hitting the drum, it's somehow a hand is hitting the drum, but it's not part of you personally. It's just take yourself out of it.
Well, see, that's kind of there are instances in Western approaches to thinking that the individual kind of dissolves, whereas in the Asian, the East, they have more of a mentality, and that's the focus, to trying to lose yourself. You're to lose your the ego, your own self in a way, and being tied to something greater. And the West has a tendency to emphasize individuality. I don't know if I'm getting this cross right, but there are times, though, it's like not everything's hard and fast rules. It seems like there is kind of a time. I've heard of musicians saying when they were playing with a band, like maybe something that's more organic, to use a kind of a hippie term, I guess. But when they're playing, they find themselves going beyond their formal, what they also used to think was their limits. Mm-hmm. And now, when you're playing a harp, it seems like it's so kind of, I can't say rigid, but there's so many prescribed things you have to do. You have to keep, there's so many things you're having to do to keep that sound coming, coming out. You're playing kind of excuse me, I'm not using the right musical terms, but you kind of keep there's a kind of the rhythm going, and then you're also playing the other variation on that or some, and there's so much going on mentally with your hands. How do you get this all working? I've tried to play a piano before, not a keyboard, one of those cheapo ones, and you get one hand going well, but then you have to add the other hand, and then try to get this all coordinated. With a harp, from what I'm seeing, there's an amazing amount of synergy, I guess, the term, going on there.
Well, it's kind of funny that you say that, because I don't think of myself as a very coordinated person. I might have told you that before. I've tried aerobics in my life and never been any good at it, because, your hands are doing one thing and your legs are doing something else, and it's just too hard for me to figure out. And in other areas, I'm not very coordinated, but I guess just by sort of sticking with the harp for years and years and doing all the technique exercises and things like that enables me to do it. But yeah, I guess there is a lot going on, but I guess by working at it, you get to be able to do it.
Well, I didn't want to mount a foot cam there, but there's also, you're pressing at the same time you're playing. But probably at every piece you have your feet touching the pedals, or pressing the pedals. That's like a piano. There's so much going on, and I'm sitting there amazed when somebody. They could take something I could see so complicated and make it so effortless. It seems effortless.
Yeah. On the harp, the pedals, it has pedals like a piano, but they don't serve the same function. On the harp, they make the notes sharp or flat or natural. I know I've told that before, but in case anyone's watching who hasn't seen them before, there are 7 pedals, and each one, one for each of the white keys of a piano. There's a B, C, D, E, F, G. So there are pedals for each of those notes, and one pedal controls all the Ds. So right now all the Ds are in D flat. If I move a pedal down a notch, they become D natural, and down another notch, they become D sharp. So there's 3 possible positions for each of the foot pedals, and there's a mechanism that goes up through the column and moves these little. This contraption here, these discs, they turn. So that's how a pedal harp, how you get the sharps and flats. On the lever harp, a smaller harp, it would be different. You'd move it, little hand levers.
See, that's what I'm saying. There's so much going on there. I mean,
Okay.
it's also. I mean, it's like it kind of like to me, it would confound me. I mean, I would be dumbfounded. I mean, whatever. I mean, it just there's so much going on with the harp. There's so much. Well, I've seen guys just play guitar, and I'm sitting there amazed at. You know, you go back to the point where you're saying sometimes you feel uncoordinated and stuff like that. I've seen guys who are like that playing guitar. When they get into that guitar in their hands, they're another person.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing part of any kind of art, the performing arts. Because you see that you don't usually watch a painter or sculptor create, but you watch a person create music or play music or whatever, and you just see that they're so caught up with it. There is a spiritual side to it. There's a mathematics side to it, a mathematical side, perfectionism and perfection on that. The notes and the vibration of the strings. They can. To have it in tune, you're going to have this many vibrations per minute. That's, to me, that's, when I first found that out, I was like, I was just amazed at the precision. And yet you have to keep that together, plus you also have this very human element being fused in that.
Right.
So,
okay, that's interesting. Good way of putting that.
Yeah, I just think that's like, there's so much stuff going on there. I mean, that's why I can say just stuff. I mean, I can't describe, because I just sit there and awe of people who can play an instrument. I mean, especially well-versed, very well, fluently, whatever you call it. They're caught up in it. There seems almost like it's just like you can actually see when they're done with the performance, they're exhausted. No, do you feel that?
Actually, it is physically exhausting. And well, I guess it's partly mentally, because you have to concentrate, but also just it's physically, in a way, it's kind of athletic. Or probably playing any instrument is in some ways. It's very similar to athletics. So it tends to be more tiring for a musician to play than what it looks like. Sometimes people say, "Oh, you would just play all day if you could, wouldn't you?" And I mean, I love the harp, but playing all day would just be too physically tiring for me even to think about. That's one reason musicians take breaks. It's not just so they can go and goof off somewhere. You really physically need a break after a certain amount of playing.
Well, I've videotaped a lot of events, and standing behind a camera, making sure everything's going wrong with the viewfinder. After like 2 or 3 hours of doing that, my lower back starts cramping up. My neck starts cramping up, and it's like you got something you're not holding in your hand. That makes it a lot easier when you have it walking around like a bigger camera and you're holding it on your shoulder. Everything's cramping up. I mean, your neck's cramped up. When you get done, you feel like you just want to take a steam bath, get a massage. I mean, especially you're doing 3, 4, 5 hours. I've done up to 8 hours of recording. But I mean, just a musician, though, it does. I've seen the guys playing the horn, especially, or drums. There's a reason why those guys look sweaty at the end of the performance.
Right.
They're they're probably doing as much as running, a runner is going to do.
Yeah, and ideally you'd find a kind of technique. Either learn a technique, or else you might have to amend. Like even if you've taken lessons for years, you might have to adjust your technique. So it's good if you can find a technique that lets you be as relaxed as possible while you're playing. Like, you don't want to have any more tension than you absolutely need. So that's one thing I've learned is, partly with the help of some of my teachers, and then I've also changed some things since then to make it more relaxing for myself. So it's important to have a relaxing technique, but even with the most relaxing technique possible, I think it's still going to be physically tiring just because you're moving, and any kind of motion is going to cause some tension.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, another thing is too, the expression "in the zone" comes to mind, and what I see is musicians get into a zone,
Right.
And it's almost like when you're caught up in that, you don't feel the exertion you're exerting,
That's
stuff
true.
you're exerting.
Yeah.
But afterwards, you feel this totally drained.
That's right. Yeah, sometimes like when you're performing or playing, it's different every time you do it. So, sometimes it feels like you have to concentrate and work really hard to be able to do anything, and then sometimes it just comes effortlessly, and then once in a while maybe it's when you're in the zone, as you put it, like it seems like you're not even, it seems like, sort of like you're watching someone else play. Like sometimes it's like, where did that come from? You're just sort of outside of yourself. So there's all different ways that it can feel when you're playing.
Right.
So.
See, I just think the mind, I mean, I just think that's the very interesting part of any kind of human endeavor, especially where it involves some physical action, physicality, I guess you'd call it. I think that's the amazing part of performing, and that's the reason why I think people should encourage like the arts and the music. And just yesterday, no, today's Thursday. Tuesday we had a man who actually started a music school here in Flint, and his name is Matt Smith. I think it is. Hold on here, Matthew Smith,
Okay.
and he has he's working on one of the UAW halls. They allow him to use that to a facility for to have a place to bring the students as their school basically, and because all the schools in the Flint area have largely they've had their music and art programs gutted. It's amazing we even have schools left, and we have very few of them left. And so he actually is going on, and he's actually got to support a different organizations and foundations for a nonprofit, to bring kids in and teach them. And I think that there's so many overlapping areas that music and art basically can allow a child to develop. That's not maybe, actually would be actually easy to recognize as a potential for that. I mean, there's like, I guess like Huey Lewis, I've always heard the story that he tested a perfect score on an ECT or SAT score in math. And they accused him of cheating, so he took it again and got the same score.
Wow.
But his family were musicians, and
Okay.
math was always something that they dealt with through math and through music, and he got such a grasp on it, it wasn't that hard for him. And there are other studies have shown that there was a tie between mathematics and music ability and mathematics, but also just the fact that they have an outlet, They have an outlet that gives them a passion, that gives them something that they're tied to, that they feel some kind of, they develop their esteem around, other than just the more negative aspects of living.
And you're actually creating something, like you're creating a beautiful sound or composing something, or I think it's good for kids to realize that they can actually create something, good or beautiful, and do something positive with their life like that. So.
See, I think there's something amazing about music because G.K. Chesterton always advocated the idea that if you look at the caves, drawings on the caves, and they find, like, especially the ones in France, and some of the oldest drawings on the wall, we might have evolved and came from another animal, but there's something unique about humans because we are the only ones that actually created a way of actually tapping in and creating sound, and found that pleasurable, then found a way of marking down those sounds so they could be duplicated by somebody else far away at a different time. We also created instruments, and look at the artwork on that. I mean, that harp. Not only does it get a beautiful sound, but the appearance of that is just beautiful. I mean,
Thank you.
and I don't know. See, there's so much there that so much with music that kind of brings everything together. Artistic endeavor, the ability to use tools, and all that stuff that's essentially human. Everything. I guess the best term to be used, again, the hippie term, is organic. Everything is kind of, it does come from a very strongly natural source and emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's true. Yeah. Like in music school, they often analyze things in very theoretical ways, and I was never very good at that. I mean, I think it's useful to know certain kinds of theories so that you'll be able to identify chords, or having a knowledge of chords helps you play well, or there are certain things like that. But a lot of the music school training was way too theoretical for me, and I guess the way I tend to see music is more in terms of emotions or visual or like mental images or things like that. So I guess that's more, right-brained or something like that. Or was it left brain?
I forget what side.
Yeah, I think it's right-brained. Yeah, I think I was right the first time. Yeah.
No, maybe this is a question you're not prepared for, but is there a piece that you play that you actually find yourself getting caught up when you're playing it? Almost like it's an emotionally stirring event for you while you're playing it.
Yeah, well, actually, one of the orchestra things I was in recently, we did a movement of Stravinsky. It was part of the Firebird. No, what? I'm trying to remember which Stravinsky it was, but for a second it was so emotional. It sort of threw me because I had to be concentrating on what strings to play and what beat to come in, all those things. But I was suddenly all so caught up in the emotion of it that it was very difficult for me to concentrate. So
So-
things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I see that in singers too. I mean, I don't know if it's a show or they know how to do a presentation of. When I hear a singer, especially when they're singing something they themselves, wrote. Like groups like Journey and stuff, like Steve Perry when he was young, when he was still with Journey, he would sing so much, eyes was closed, sweat pouring off him, but you could just tell he was in another place almost. At least it always came across that way to me.
Oh yeah. Oh, it was the end of the Firebird Suite. That was the last movement of it. That's what I'm thinking of. Okay, I'm sorry. Go on. Yeah, but yeah, sometimes these musicians are like really big, tough guys, and you don't think of them as having a sensitive side, but then it comes through in their playing or their music or something. So.
Well, I think it definitely does, especially, I mean, even with the garage bands and the, groups I've been around, people performing, there's definitely a very strong emotional element. I mean, they're tied to their performance. I mean, they might be aware they're not technically perfect, but when somebody criticizes them, it just it just rips them, rips them to shreds,
Right.
Emotionally. Also, when they put it on themselves, they have high expectations, and when they're performing or they're just even practicing it doesn't come off right. There's an emotional kind of upheaval, that they feel like they're less of a person because they couldn't get that right.
Yeah, they're perfectionists.
Right. Now, that you have to be. And now, would you find that perfectionism is probably a good quality for, a person in music to have?
Well, to some degree. Like often people get too perfectionistic to the point where they can't enjoy it, or to the point where you're like, if you make some mistake, you focus on that so much that you can't play the rest of the piece and you completely fall apart. So, I mean, you can be a perfectionist, but you have to also know that just mistakes are going to happen. You could be the greatest musician in the world and you still make some mistakes. So it's just part of, if you're not willing to make mistakes, you shouldn't be a musician. That's basically it.
Okay, when the first time you ever performed in front of a large crowd, you're probably pretty young.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I played in my school orchestras and things like that. And
Now,
my parents were nice. I'm not sure if I appreciate it at the time, but I do now. If they had company over of any kind, they would have them go up and me play some piece for them on the harp. And I think I was sort of, speaking of perfectionistic, I was often too perfectionistic. Like I feel like, but I don't have my pieces learned yet, whatever. But just the act of performing for all these people, I think, was good to develop, good practice for me.
That's putting yourself out there. I mean, it's like it's actually, to lack of a better term, and I don't sound embarrassing about it, but it's almost like you're allowing somebody to see like a side to you that a lot of times, especially when you're developing it, it's very personal. I mean, would you agree on that? It's kind of very personal. Music's very personal at least at first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there are people who like to play music who don't like to perform. So I mean, I guess it can be very personal. And then there are some people who are hams. I think I'm a little bit more of a ham. Like I do it, partly because I like to perform for people. But it still is very personal, especially when not everyone composes. But like if you compose, that's another element of making it very personal. So.
Yes, I think it would be. I mean, it's like I used to like singing, and a lot of people who overheard me say I could sing pretty well, but they always said, "Well, you should sing this one." And I always like the idea of getting out in front of in a large area to sing in front of people terrified me. I mean, it was breaking the cold sweat, And I mean, I'm a person who actually could do public speaking pretty well. I mean, that was never a big issue for me. I mean, well, initially it was, but I got over it pretty rapidly. But music to me is more personal. And it's like, basically, like somebody, the only way I can say it's like akin to is probably walking out of the shower and let somebody see you that way. And did you ever have that kind of, huh?
I don't know about that.
But it does seem like it's kind of, I don't know. To me, it's like, I guess I do have a shy streak when it comes to that. Besides, when you're doing music, when you're doing something in music or in performing like dance, which I never did. I never, did that. But you're basically, you are opening yourself up to a lot of criticism. I mean, people they think everybody's a critic, the expression's accurate.
That's true.
So can we hear another piece from you?
Sure, yes. I'm going to play next. Okay, this is, well, some people know this is Love Me Tender, but before that it was a folk song called Orally. I think it's from the Civil War, so it's Orally. I'm sorry, Kent.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
That sounded great. It just sounded great. I'm always amazed at the fact that I don't think I ever heard you play a song bad.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, of course, I'm sure when you were practicing, that probably did happen. But no, that song I was like always. I always remember her that. Like, I just have images when I hear that song of like the gay '90s. People dressed in like different suits with the hats, and that song good because there was always in the TV. They always play that in movies or shows connected to that era. So it's like a sentimental song. Though. I mean, it's good. Also, it's got a very kind of a. It's got a very lightness to it. I like that.
When I was a kid, we had a record of Burl Ives singing that song, so that was my first exposure to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we talked about this before, and your family had a wide variety of music they listened to and enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you like if somebody was like to go out to your vehicle and what CD would you have in the CD player?
Well, actually, at the moment, I have a CD by David Sylvian. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was in the band Japan, and he also became a solo artist, but he has I guess he's sort of influenced by Hindu mysticism, so some of his songs are about things like that. They're kind of spacey a little bit, but he has a very hypnotic style and I think a very beautiful voice, so that's what I have in there right now. I listen to, I guess, like my buttons are pressed to mostly rock or popular stations, but I listen to classical music and jazz and variety of things.
Well, see, I go by streaks too. I listen a lot of Kate Bush. I don't know if
yeah, right. Yeah, she's kind of similar, she's along the same lines as David Sylvian.
Very quirky. Another person too that I liked, that I got to know through an ex-girlfriend of mine. She was a big fan of Robin Hitchcock.
Oh yeah, okay.
And very quirky kind of lyrics, musically brilliant.
Right, yeah.
Like almost like a Frank Zappa in a way. I mean, he had the oddball lyrics, but the music was. The only way I could say it was sound music. I mean, it was like solid music. It was, he wasn't fluff. These guys weren't fluff,
So, yes, Robin Hitchcock had some song Radio or something like that. I just loved. I could listen to that song over and over again. He was great.
Yeah, I mean, and the lyrics are just like charming, witty, bizarre.
Right, yeah.
He's a quirky individual, very polite, very nice person. I met him a couple of times after he played down in Royal Oak one time when I was down there, and came out after the show, and very, very, just a very humble individual from what I gathered.
Nice. Because sometimes musicians are, you're talking about ego, get very egotistical, and who knows why. But yeah, I think it's it's really nice if you meet a musician and they happen to be a wonderful person. But I think even if the individual, if you don't like them personally, hopefully, I think music is beyond the individual. So I don't think people should be limited to only liking people who agree with their politics or who are nice people, or I guess I like to think that even if someone doesn't like me personally, they could still come to one of my concerts and really enjoy my music, things like that.
A lot of times I think an actor, an actress, a musician does himself a serious harm by talking too much about their politics or too much about certain issues. There's some people will say, well, they should, because they should have the courage to speak out, that encourage other people. So I can see both sides of that. Mm-hmm. But my view is when I get somebody who I disagree with vehemently, most musicians out there who are like the pop groups and stuff like that, I do disagree with vehemently. I do find it, I mean, I admit this, I shouldn't, but I find myself, it changes my viewpoint of their music. And that's, I guess, that is a thing they have to risk. They have to risk that. I mean, they have to be humans. But then again, sometimes I think they're trying to over-glorify themselves by taking these strong stances.
Yeah, sometimes it's a risk, but then sometimes it might be calculated. Like a certain political viewpoint might be popular and hip at the time, so they come out and take a stand that, under the guise of being very courageous, it might just be to sell more albums too. So, I guess there are both sides of that.
Yes, I could see it. I mean, let's face it, it would, a lot of people would buy some album or something like that just to hear the political statement the guy's making on it. I mean, so it could go either way. To me, but my view is like I can't say be entertained because that sounds like frivolous, but I want something different from a musician rather than being preached to.
Right. Yeah. Anytime when you feel like you're being preached to, that's not good art.
No. I mean, it's like let's face it. How many people? I remember one time I had a conversation with a professor, and he said, "We're talking about writing." I was engaged in writing at that time, and he said, "Well, are you going to be didactic about it? You know, teaching. You're going to try to teach something with this. And then I said, well, yeah. And he goes, then he said, then your art's going to suffer. And he was a psychology professor, so he was, but he made a valid point, and it got me thinking. It's like, basically, you know, there's so many ways you can interpret works. I mean, there's hermeneutics, the area of literature that actually deals with the interpretation of literature. Typically, it's tied towards scripture. You know, that terms you apply towards, you know, Bible study or other sacred documents or whatever. It comes from the word, you know, Hermes, the Greek or Roman god of, you know, the messenger of the gods, basically. And what was he meaning by these things? Well, you can take that with music, and art has the same potential. You're looking at somebody's artwork, or you listen to somebody's musical piece, original work. You're going to bring your own interpretation to it, and it's going to be larger or grander or more controversial maybe the original artist intended to be.
Of course, a lot of the great art is political. Like, you know, I played the Livonia Symphony often, and the conductor there, I'll probably mispronounce his name, Volodymyr Sheshchuk, he's from Russia, and our last concert was Ukrainian music, and one of the pieces was unfortunately these were all composers I wasn't familiar with before, but it was something about, you know, about Russia under Stalin and the people being, you know, sent in trains off to Siberia or something, you know, so, you know, it was really heavy, but I mean, a lot of the great art comes from, you know, very difficult, you know, politics, or, you know, making a statement about what's going on in the country at the time, whatever country it is. So.
Well, like Beethoven actually dedicated a piece to Napoleon at one time, initially, and then later on he saw Napoleon was a disappointment. I guess that's the best way I could sum it up, because if I say one thing, other people are going to call me up and say, no, that wasn't his view. But I guess he was disappointed.
Like that, right,
yeah. And do you remember what piece that was that he had dedicated to Napoleon?
Maybe Eroica. That would make sense, I'm guessing, but I'm not. Because that means hero, so I mean, maybe it was originally about Napoleon being a hero, but again, I could be wrong too, so I don't really know.
Well, they say so. There's like in the movie Amadeus, you know, they make reference. The king said, you know, he didn't want this, but he didn't want dancing or music when there's dancing in the sun, because music incited people, because it actually, his cousin was fearing for her life, and it turned out there was Marie Antoinette. So yeah, you know, but it actually does seem the music seems a lot of times to either cause the foment for change, or is maybe the cause of it, you know,
right, yeah.
You know, or actually just tied along with it. Like Wagner. I mean, Wagner was, you know, a very controversial person in his own era.
Right, and there's still I'm personally Jewish, and a lot of Jews, you know, refuse to listen to or perform Wagner, or, you know, refuse to go to his concerts. But I just think his music is so extraordinary that, I guess I think he was probably leaning in an anti-Semitic direction, but he was before Hitler, so, you know, it's not clear to me that he would have gone along with what the Nazis were doing. Like, I don't think that you could blame him for, you know, I think that would be, you'd have to be more of a soothsayer than I think he really was, you know.
Yeah.
So I just love Wagner's music. I think he's great.
I had a one time I worked in the collection area for you know, the audiovisual technology department over at U of M, and one woman was just going through stacks of this is albums. I mean, this is how long ago this was actually. And she goes, I don't listen to him, and I said, why? Well, he was anti-Semitic, you know, talking about Wagner.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, you know, I didn't know that at the point, because I never was brought into his political things. When I heard his pieces, it was played at basically was a music appreciation class, and I was just caught up like, man, this is amazing. I mean,
right, yeah. I'm
just powerful.
Yeah, so I guess I would like to think that, you know, however flawed he as an individual was, we can still enjoy his music on a different level. So.
Right. Because, well, another thing is, too, like Nietzsche's always been accused, in a philosophical realm, a lot of people try to connect him with the Nazis. He hated the anti-Semites. I mean, he had a problem with his own sister because her husband was an anti-Semite. As a matter of fact, they tried to start an Aryan colony over in South or Central America, and she was part of that. He basically disowned her for all that time before her husband died, you know. So I don't see where he was, you know, the people do that. They attach something to it, like a political significant thing. But when you're talking 100 years after the fact, what real relevance does it have at that point?
Right.
You know, it really doesn't. I mean, let's face it. I mean, let's face it. The scriptures are wrote in time where there was a lot of political change and upheaval and hatred's going on. But now we can't really get caught up with that. I mean, how far will we go back to? We find meaning in it, but how far are we going to go back, and what are we going to attach to it to make it have meaning? I mean, is it negative? I mean, or are you just going to say? You got to look at it kind of a skate over that surface. You know, you can't really get caught up in, because it's ridiculous to go try to attach yourself to an era that's so long bygone before you're born. You know, that you're creating almost like a scenario that it doesn't exist. You know, now, you know, at this point. But that's what it is with all art. I mean, all art is for controversial. I mean, but then again, when an artist goes out, a musician goes out, tries to be controversial, I think their work suffers. I mean, as you know, being able to appeal to other people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are people who just try to be controversial for the sake of creating some kind of controversy.
Madonna comes to mind, you know, in the pop culture, you know. So many other ones. I mean, actually, matter of fact, I've kind of prided myself now, because I've weathered all this storm of controversy of so-and-so doing this. Now I have a tendency, if it's anything current, I have a tendency to be dismissive of it until maybe 20 years out after the fact. And say if it's still got relevancy at that point, then I might give it a second look. But I mean, I guess that, but I just get so caught up in the personalities coming to the forefront and being the focus. I just want to listen to music. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like asking, is that too much to ask? You know, you know. So now, who do you like I say, we already found out you listen to some person. Most of us probably. I'm going to check that person out that you mentioned. What was the name again?
David Sylvian.
Sylvian, okay.
Yeah.
You know, you never know where you're going to find your next interest. You know, if our musical interest or artistic or author-wise. You know, you never know who you're going to, go off on a tangent because somebody else sent you there. You know, and it's really enjoyable. You know, you never know. But now you compose music yourself.
Right. Yeah.
No, it's like. You want to play one of your pieces now, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, I can't hear it. Sorry. Okay. This is a piece I actually made up in honor of. I actually had an older sister who was. I guess she never made it into the world. Like she was meant to. She died before being born, actually, but I wanted to honor her, and so I made up this song, and this is called My Sister's Song.
That is a beautiful song. It really is. Now that was, you said that was one in like a tribute to your own sister.
Yeah.
It's like that's, and I saw, I kind of sensed you kind of getting emotional about that before you started playing it. That's, that's another thing is too about music. It's like it does. I think it has to have some kind of basis, emotional basis, and to be good, I think it has to. But I mean, which is weird that so many people can actually find a song that they could connect to. Basically, it's I guess the best way to say it's a mass-produced song, but it seems to take on a definite personal meaning to them.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes a song that can be, really trivial to one person is deeply meaningful to another, and it could be, based on what's happening in your life when that song comes out, or it could be for any number of reasons. But different people's. So you should never just dismiss a song because that song could be, deeply meaningful to someone.
Yeah, it's like I'll listen to a song like as I listen to a song and it has got so many. When I can listen to close my eyes, I actually would put me sometimes back into an era, that I was caught up like my, from this time frame to this time frame, like certain age groups, that I was in at that time, and the emotions and everything that it just brings back just seems to be so much alive. Well, listen to that song, And I think some people that I've talked to doesn't have that effect, but most people I do talk to, they say that has almost a similar effect.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
It's a good song.
it becomes. I mean, like, to use a kind of a silly expression, becomes your soundtrack. Like when you're listening to radio. That's the reason I used to like listen to radio, because you're going around, certain things are happening, all of a sudden a certain song came on, and it almost so set the tone or is now attached to that moment.
Right.
And
you can dislike a song for the same reason.
Right.
Like there are songs that I like now that at the time they came out I didn't like them because, I thought, all the mean kids listen to that song or something like that. So
right. But music does have meaning. I mean,
Yeah.
you attach so much meaning because it seems to have. It connects viscerally to us. I mean, we touch viscerally to it. I mean, there's some music I can say, okay, that's not bad. I can say technically it might sound great, but it doesn't have an emotional
right.
attachment to it. People, like we've talked about that before. Some people can be so good technically, but they're forgettable. But you got a person like Joe Cocker, in perfect voice, but not a very, very memorable individual. I mean,
Okay, I'm not that familiar with him. So
Huh?
I'm not so familiar with
yeah,
him.
he's
so I
just
don't
an
know.
English. He's an English singer. Just got this craggly voice. It sounds like he's going to like, he's going up to a high range and he can't go to that. And just like scraping to get up there, and then. But there's something charming about that. There's something that resonates for us,
Cool.
Well, you ever heard that? There's a couple of songs in the '80s that he had sang, and it's like I'm just drawing a blank now.
Okay.
But I know him.
I'll have to check him out. Yeah.
As soon as I
I've
hear
heard the name, but
yeah, he's big pop in the '70s to the '80s. I mean, he looked older than he really was because I think he was a drunk, but I don't know that for certain. But I mean, he just had this very unusual voice. And
I think Tom Waits the same thing. I mean, I'm personally not a big Tom Waits fan, but I know a lot of people are, and I think it's a similar thing. Like there's something.
Yeah, I always see people on Facebook. They'll have like a list of their and Tom Waits. Tom Waits is there, and or like that guy that used to be with Black Flag, or the Misfits, or one of the other groups.
Henry Rollins.
Henry Rollins. Yeah.
I like Henry Rollins.
Yeah, some people really like him. I mean, and let's face it, I don't think he's a perfect performer, but he's his personality and his music combined to make it unforgettable.
It's very intense.
Yeah.
Actually, my brother and I went to a poetry reading of his. It's kind of, I don't know if a lot of people have had that privilege, but yeah, he wrote really good, depressing poetry. But yeah, in Toronto somewhere there.
Well, I met up with Ray Manzarek, the keyboard player for the Doors, just passed
Yeah.
away a couple weeks ago. And I met him down in your town, actually. My girlfriend at the time and I were down there, and we saw him at the Heidelberg. He was performing with some of the Beat Poets.
Mm-hmm.
And that was I didn't know at the time because I was just getting into listening to the Doors again because the movie just came out. The Doors movie that Oliver Stone made just came out. And he was down there performing with these guys. It was Michael McClure was one of the guys.
Okay.
And it was really kind of it was a unique experience. I'm so glad that I got a chance to meet him. I got his autograph. He signed a book of poetry of Rimbaud, which was one of the favorite poets, I should say, of Jim Morrison himself.
Oh, okay.
And so, and and now he's gone. I mean, and just it seemed like time went so fast after. It just doesn't seem it was 20 some years ago, but it was. And but I'm glad I got to meet him because I mean, it made me appreciate the the music of the Doors more after I had a connection with this individual.
Yeah, Ray Manzarek had a lot to say about that. I heard him being interviewed on public radio the other day, and I guess it was after he died. They played a recording or interview they had done already, but it just made it so interesting hearing the process they went through to create the songs. I mean, they really put a lot of thought into it. So.
Well, they're definitely. Some of the critics at that time were always trying to trash them, and they're saying like they're like they sound like an Econo Lodge, music band or something like that. They'd be playing at the Econo Lodge, and and when you're, I don't know, after you can probably see where they're maybe getting that at. They're that attack, but when you're listen to the work as a whole, the body of work overall for the Doors, there's a uniqueness there. There really was. There was a vision, and I don't use that term very often, but I mean there was a definite vision there. It was great stuff, and I'm so glad to get a chance to meet him, and I'm so sad to see he's gone, because I think he had great musical ability, and I think he could still produce the great music yet, and he's gone, and then you're never going to have somebody like him again, You might have somebody who could play a keyboard, but not with what he's all connected to, and I think that's what makes us here. I mean, I think that so many times I'm a very political person, so I get caught up in that, and I get caught up in the mundane things of life. But when you look at music, I mean, it seems like it can outlive you. That'd be great if I had the ability to do something like that, to be tied to that, And now you have that ability. You're tied. You could be tied to something that can outlive you,
Oh, well, I guess we all can in different ways, I guess.
Yeah, but immortality is like it's like. The Greeks always said that, they believe that somebody who was immortal is somebody in the next generation remember them. And that's their form of immortality. I think that music and art, and, some degree sports, I guess, although...
Yeah. But you don't have to know an individual's name for them to live on, I think. Like, I think if you're working for a cause, or if you're, creating, maybe working at a school and that school survives, or... if you're helping humanity in some way and your actions will have some effect, I think that you're still living on. Like, if it doesn't have to be some really deep, heavy thing, but I think that, if you create something good for the world, then you're immortal, whether people know your name or not. So.
See, it's almost hard to talk about music and art without being tied to some kind of spiritual or moral or ethical considerations. Mm-hmm. Because it's all tied to being human,
right,
for the good and for bad and indifferent, it's all tied to it. Well, anyway, we're going to wrap this up, and if you got another piece we can take us out on, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Let's see, this is from Jupiter from the Planets by Holst. I think it's also been done as a hymn, in various names, but this is the theme from Jupiter by Holst.
And I thank you again, Laurel, for showing up. And anytime you want to come in, please feel free to call me, okay? And we'll get it set up.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.